วัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon and good morning for those who are from Europe. And I would like to welcome you to our afternoon session on Policy Dialogue, ASEAN EU Strategic Partnership on STI Solutions towards Inclusive and Sustainable ASEAN. So this session we will cover topics such as innovation policy to combat global challenges, ASEAN capability to apply new technology and human capital investment, and also research infrastructure facility sharing between EU and ASEAN. And we also welcome perspective from ASEAN member states to join us this afternoon. So this session will be packed with 5 speakers. So first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers for this session. The first one joining us from online, Mr. Pierrick Fellon, Counselor, EU Delegation to India. Please welcome Mr. Pierrick Fellon. Are you online with us now, right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. And our second speaker today, joining us on site, is Mr. Aldo De La Richa, team leader and key expert, ASEAN Political Security Community, Enhanced Regional EU-ASEAN Dialogue Instrument, or EREDI. The third speaker, please welcome Mr. Aldo De La Richa. And our third speaker today is Dr. Lily Yrvilajit, Secretariat. Yeah, she's the Secretariat of ASEAN BCG Network and Vice President of National Science and Technology Development Agency, or NSTDA, Thailand. Our fourth speaker, joining us from online, is Dr. Leah J. Bundia. She is the Assistant Secretary, International Cooperation, Department of Science and Technology, Philippines. Please welcome Dr. Leah. Our fifth speaker is joining us on site, Dr. Dudi Hidayat. He is the Director of Research Technology and Innovation Policy Formulation, National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, from Indonesia. All right, so very exciting. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Pierrick Fellon, the EU delegation to India, to present his perspective on strategic partnership between ASEAN or India, EU, and his, please.
Yes, hello, good afternoon to you in ASEAN countries. I hope you can hear me. I will just share a few slides. So let me start from the beginning, but I will also take some of my time to later discuss either directly on questions that you may have or at the panel time. So I am head of a department here taking care of the ASEAN dialogue.
Excuse me, Mr. Pierre, can you make it slideshow and full screen, please?
Slideshow. Yes, I am full screen. From beginning, at least on my side, I am full screen. You don't see it full screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, because on my, maybe Pat from your technical side can solve it. I am on full screen on my side.
Yeah, can you uncheck use presenter view on the ribbon up there? There is if you go up to the tab. Okay, unclick. Yeah, that should be good. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we manage. The god of internet are with us. So I will be very brief because I want to give you an example of what we try to do concretely with ASEAN Secretariat, for which I really welcome the strong cooperation and especially with member states. I'm very happy today to have on the panel two nice ladies whom I know, Dr. Bondia and Dr. Lili, with whom we have been working for several years, and Mr. De La Rizia, our colleague contractor for one of the initiatives. So very easily, I will explain about the basic principle. So why is Europe linking our policy objectives? And the colleague from our foreign affairs gave a good example of what we are doing on energy and Green Deal, is because we can use research and innovation to sustain policy objectives. So it is a case of the Green Deal as presented by the colleague. It is again the case, and right now with the energy situation, you know that Europe is at war, unfortunately, and we are using, especially now, a lot of the research funding for supporting renewable energies, trying to see alternatives to Russian gas. So this is very strong political request that we have to use research for specific purposes. And the same happened when we had the COVID crisis. The European Union has spent more than 5 billion euros in the domain of COVID treatment, COVID prevention, from a research perspective. So 5 billion euro only at the federal level of the EU, in addition to whatever the EU 27 member states have been adding to the pot. What we do is extremely simple. As any government organization, the European Union is organizing call for proposals, mobility schemes to exchange scientists. Of course, during COVID, for example, mobility schemes were on hold, but now we are slowly restarting, and it will be one of the points which I will mention. And with ASEAN, we are also using the fact that we have called for proposals. How we do it? You will see, I will point to several examples because there are several types of supports. The first type of support, I go to the next slide, is specifically with ASEAN, and Dr. Lili, who is on the panel, was with NSTDA involved. It was a joint funding scheme whereby the European Union was giving funding for a joint secretariat, and the EU and ASEAN member states were very successful to finance their own participation in joint actions. So Dr. Lili will probably elaborate on this example. I will be very quick, therefore. We have a lot of brochures. If you Google internet, we have a tutorial video. I will just give a few details on how the GFS, Joint Funding Scheme, worked. Because it started about 5 years ago, so it took us some time to start it, but it was very successful. And here you see the impact it had. We have been co-financing 14 million euros. We have been involved in 18 countries, so almost all the ASEAN countries, almost all the European countries in 42 projects. And 178 teams in the EU and ASEAN were formed. So it's just to give you the range, and we wish to continue. We had a change. We have changed now, and you will see later in a new program called Horizon Europe. And therefore, GFS was on hold. But the good news, Dr. Lili, is that our office is definitely moving forward now to restart it from, we hope, end of this year, early next year. The type of research that we have been financing in those projects were various, but with ASEAN especially, we always come back to similar issues because it's not by doing research for 2-3 years that you solve it. So a big chunk is on health and the rest is on environment, which even in other areas, as on the projects that we have with e-Ready, which is another type of joint initiative with ASEAN Secretariat, we are also similarly engaging in come in those areas. And here is just to show you that the type of projects we had. In a blue the blue team was Europe, and in red the red team was ASEAN. So you see a very strong participation, of course, of Thailand, Indonesia, but many others, and several other ASEAN countries who are not yet on board will join. We wish, for example, to have Singapore heavily involved on this scheme. From the EU side, likewise, it's not necessarily all EU countries on board at the moment, but with the effort from colleagues like Dr. Lily, we will very drastically increase it in end of 22, 23. A second example of possible areas, and I heard the moderator mentioning for our session to discuss research infrastructures and high performance computing, which is putting together high computing time, is an area where the EU is extremely strong, one of the world leader. And right now it's such monitoring of data makes sense in environment issues, makes sense in a COVID situation. So this is also an area for which we want cooperation with the EU, and I will give you another example later on HPC, high performance computing. This is, but Mr. De La Ricia, very likely our contractor will give you examples of what we have been doing on HPC, so I will be extremely brief. We had the idea of not only look at joint projects. It was example one I gave you about joint funding scheme, but look at mobilizing young, talented ASEAN scholars and organize a virtual school, which we hope that at the end of this year will be a school in person. But it was a kind of summer school, even though we organized it this year at the end of the year in December. So it was extremely successful to bring forward the new generation of scientists who later could engage in projects like the one that I mentioned in my example one on the joint funding scheme. We are looking also possibly at the use of HPC. I was flagging it on the COVID-19 pandemics because we are all concerned and we have mutual interest to cooperate. It's not because we have more machines in Europe that we can solve it alone. Pandemics are worldwide, and we need therefore to use epidemiology, to use modeling in ASEAN as well. We need to partner, and this is my key message. Europe can never solve it alone. I want to give another area which I flagged earlier, which is on impact of climate change, transition to what our President Ursula von der Leyen flagged, the transition to the new economy, to the green growth. Here we had a project on green technologies between ASEAN and EU, and especially Dr. Bundia, who is on the panel, was directly involved. So I will not go into much details. I just want to highlight in 2 slides what has been done. We tried in green tech to work on plastic waste. It was extremely successful, even though we were all online. Philippines took the lead to organize webinars for almost a year on different types of plastic waste solutions. Vietnam was involved on sustainable manufacturing, and with ASE and Secretariat, we started an initial discussion on COVID and solutions from research and innovation on COVID. As I said, Dr. Bundia is very likely to give you more details. Just to close on green tech, it was very short a project, less than 2 years from September 2020, so almost at the time the pandemic was spreading until May this year. For the phase 2, we will see how to continue to support. Very likely we will use the perspective of the Horizon Europe program to support this type of research. I will go now to my last bit, which is supporting mobility of scientists between Europe and ASEAN. Several of you may have heard about Erasmus, which is very successful and open to the world. But when we speak about PhDs, postdoctors, we have a very high success on the scheme called Marie Skłodowska-Curie. So I'm not going to detail, but we have several contractors, such as Euraccess, who is very likely known from you colleagues in ASEAN, who is behind and promoting in each of the ASEAN countries how to make a proposal if you want to make a PhD in Europe, or if you want to make a postdoc, or if you want to go there as already a professor with an exchange with universities or companies. Because this Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions also support research and exchange with business. This is back to the green tech. What I wanted to say is when we unfolded the cooperation in green technologies, we immediately found out that the mobility element that we were at the time of COVID are extremely important. Because, and I want to discuss this, please moderator for the panel, the fact to run in a joint project is extremely difficult. So very likely, and we look at it on green tech already, very likely a first step is to look at mobility schemes before engaging in a joint project. So I wish that I would like we discuss this at the panel. And just 1 minute to finish my presentation, because I have to do a little bit of advertising of our Horizon Europe. So here you have a very nice picture for this program that started end of last year until 2027. So we have in EU a very good stability, and this program is above 100 billion. It's the largest public research program in the world. Here you see that we are looking at 53 billion is what we say are tackling global challenges. 25 billion is for excellence fellowships. So we have such a share, which is to address both the technological solutions and also the mobility of scientists. I just want to conclude with 2 more slides on that one is to highlight what we call missions. And especially I choose that slide because I believe it should be the objective of working with ASEAN. On all those areas, ASEAN has needs, Europe has needs, and we can find solutions together. Let's say, for example, climate and neutral smart cities. Let's look at healthy oceans with plastic pollutions. I mentioned the example of green tech, or climate change adaptation. So those are areas where we could focus cooperation. In summary, this is my last slide. I have been presenting you with different type of schemes that on which we have engaged with ASEAN countries and ASEAN Secretariat. I mentioned to you about joint funding scheme. I mentioned to you the type of e-ready actions with HPC, green technologies, or COVID. I mentioned the mobility schemes and Horizon Europe. So the objective, and I leave it with this last slide for the panel, we would like to look with ASEAN at very innovative areas like energy and cities, how to use better efficient building, as my colleague from our Foreign Affairs mentioned in the talk before. But to tackle those topics, we absolutely need to go deeper, because it's very difficult for an ASEAN participant to jump in an EU program. We need to look at matchmaking, and Dr. Bundia very likely will comment on this, and we'll need to ensure at the same time a coordination with ASEAN member states and ASEAN Secretariat. So this is exactly the slides that you need, and of course the conference will get it, but those are the contact points of all the colleagues. I hope you can see all on your screen. And thank you very much. Back to the moderator. Thank you. I finished with 15 minutes right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pierrick Filland. I hope you'll stay with us for a while, and I would like to ask the participants on site to hold on to your questions for now, and we'll have a wrap up at the end for question and answer. So for now, so we hear about instruments for collaboration between EU and ASEAN. Now we will dig further into some specific examples. So I would like to invite Mr. Aldo De Oricia to introduce us his experience from the eReady project. Please, Mr. Aldo.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I am grateful to have this opportunity of presenting how this strategic partnership between the European Union and ASEAN can be translated into reality through one of the many projects that the two regions have together, and it's the eReady, the Enhanced Regional EU-ASEAN Dialogue Instrument. A few characteristics of these instruments. First of all, it's an EU-supported project. It is demand-driven, which means that it responds to requests that come either from the ASEAN side or for the European Union side, based on concept notes about the dialogue that wants to be launched. Of course, the purpose is the dialogue. It's very important to stress what eReady is not. eReady is not an implementing project in the sense that we do not have funds to realize projects. We facilitate dialogue, and how we do that? First of all, it is on the priority areas of both sides, ideally joint priority areas. And we can offer organizational and logistical support to events, to webinars, to seminars, to dialogues. And we can finance all the studies, all the activities that are necessary in order to provide the input, the information for these dialogue, these exchanges. And these we can do in particular through short technical assistance support. Now, we're talking about priority areas. Of course, the priority areas are those who are joint between the two regions. They are the top of the agenda of both regions. Economic and trade connectivities. You all know that connectivity is today one of the subjects which are extremely important. Digital economy. We have heard from the Green Deal, from the colleague from the delegation here, that transport is very important in the agenda. We have environment, climate change. The Green Deal that was just presented is one of these elements. Human rights and gender equality, which of course are essential for the good functioning of democratic societies. Science and research, which is what Mr. Pierrick has abundantly presented, and other issues which correspond to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals. We work with the 10 ASEAN members, but our first port of call, of course, is the ASEAN Secretariat, and in particular, the Program Coordination and Project Management Division, which is our direct counterpart, while the EU delegation in Jakarta, the EU delegation to ASEAN, is the representative of our contracting authority. Now, I was saying we promote dialogues, and in each of these focal areas, we have specific dialogues which are being developed. You can see here on the screen, we will distribute after that these slides. So you can see how issues like, for instance, road transport are then translated into specific dialogues on road safety, intelligent transport systems, and right now we have a new dialogue which is about to start on regional railways, transport management, traffic management systems. Now, if we take the example of science and research, we have in the work plan, the future work plan of the project, which is until the end of eReady in December 2023, we have 4 areas which are considered. One is the dialogue on green technologies that Mr. Pierre Fillon has already presented, the high-performance computing, a dialogue on talent mobility, and one on regional research infrastructure. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to insist on the fact that all these dialogues are generated through our interaction with our counterparts. For instance, the dialogue on regional research infrastructure was in the recent COSTI event, COSTI meeting, the Committee for Science, Technology and Innovation in ASEAN. Regional research infrastructure was really one of the top subjects that were presented, and it is the result of more than a year-long exercise to reach that priority. A word on high-performance computing. We had last year, as Mr. Pierrick said, the first edition. I have to pay homage to Pierrick to have launched this idea at the beginning. It has gone a long way since then, but I think that he was the first one to say, guys, there is something where we can work together. And he was absolutely right. And the success of the first edition and the preparation of this new edition, for which the call for proposals for the students, for the candidates, has been launched last week, demonstrate the importance. And I would just like to give an example. Yesterday, on the first day, we had a very important panel with the private sector. And the panel of discussion was, of course, a BCG in action. And we had a presentation by Dr. Panit Kitsubun, Chief Operating Officer of Kinjen Biotech, which is a pharmaceutical company. At the end of the session, I approached him and I asked him if they were working with HPC. And his answer was, we wish. And he told me that his last experience in HPC was when he was preparing his PhD. Now, with this effort that we have carried out with the HPC in the project, not only we are training people from all Southeast Asia, and I have to say that it was very, very rewarding last year in the virtual first edition of the school, that we have students from each and every one of the 10 member states of ASEAN, which means a lot. Even those who you would not suspect that they are dealing with HPC were present, and some of them were even the most brilliant in the school. But the other aspect, which refers to the regional research infrastructure, is that these high-performance computing are extremely expensive. And possibly the best approach is not to have supercomputers in each and every country, but to take a regional advantage of those countries that are more advanced. At present, there is Singapore, which has a supercomputer center. Thailand will have its center up and running at the end of the year in the framework of the NSTDA. Indonesia is aiming at having one. And the idea is to see how to take a regional advantage of these initiatives. I have to remember that the R of e-ready is regional, which an aspect on which we are insisting very much. We had the dialogue on green technology, and here I would like really to salute the work done by the Philippines and our Filipino expert. I would like to mention her because she has done an extremely brilliant work, Miss Evelyn Taboada, and Dr. Buendia knows her well. They had webinars where practitioners, academia, administrators, politicians of both the European Union and ASEAN were sitting together, sharing experiences, and this is exactly what, in our view, it's the contribution that a dialogue instrument can provide for the reflection about these subjects. We are preparing this is the phase one. We are preparing the next phase of the project. Of course, there is one part which is no longer the competence of e-ready, which was what Mr. Fillon was explaining. There are other instruments that permit to follow up on certain of the, I would say, the side benefits of the project. But in my view, there is a scope to continue with what the Philippines were doing, for instance, in these exchanges on plastic waste management, which is a subject which is extremely important for the whole region. And again, I would like to insist on the fact that this is not one side giving lessons to the other side. It's really a dialogue in the sense that we put on the table, we share experiences, and we see what can be the best solution for common problems. We have talent mobility and regional research infrastructure. As I said, these are elements that are coming at the top of the agenda of the region in terms of science and research. And it's interesting because there is the aspect that Mr. Fillon was stressing, which means the possibility of studying in Europe, but there is also the issue of the regional dimension of that, the regional exchange. And there is, for us, already the possibility of cooperating with both regions on these aspects. Then there are the other dialogues. We take transport. The Andreas from the delegation was mentioning how transport is important due to the contribution of the green gas emissions. We have connectivity. We are promoting the formulation of an ASEAN digital index development that would permit to facilitate this consolidation at regional level of the connectivity. We have dialogues on environment and climate change. Of course, we had the example of what Andreas said, and there again, what can an instrument like e-Ready provide? Well, a platform, and we are very pleased to be working now with the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue, CSDSD, which is placed at the management, at the College of Management of Mahidol University, and they will host this platform that hopefully will permit to continue this exercise of sharing experiences, see what is done in the region and in the European Union, and see how we can communicate on that. There are aspects that might appear less directly involved with the issue of innovation and research, but as a matter of fact, when you talk about gender equality, you realize, for instance, that the possibility of having a gender balance in research, it's something which is very important. And I salute our moderator. When one speaks about nuclear energy, one would not expect a woman because of the image. And here we have the demonstration of that. And I think that in all our dialogues, we have this dimension. I have to salute the openness that exists in Southeast Asia to give crucial role to gender and to give the possibility to women to reach position not of power, but position of authority where they can lead the way. And then we have the sustainable development, sustainable agriculture. This is a new dialogue that we are launching based on decarbonization of the agriculture. All these meant to make sure that there is an exchange, that there is an open and frank discussion. Immediately after this session, I will have to rush because there will be this afternoon a SOMI EU, a meeting of the European Union with the senior official meeting on energy, where we will talk about the possibility of having a high-level dialogue on clean energy, which, again, it's a subject which is at the top of the agenda. We are glad to be able to contribute with our project within our possibilities. I repeat, we cannot implement projects, but what we can do is to facilitate the discussions. I would like to stop here before the end of the 50 minutes, and I'm ready to answer all the questions when we'll have the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aldo de la Ricia, for introducing the eReady project, and we see that it is a very effective instrument for dialogue and communication, to sharing ideas and to initiate a collaborative project together. So next, I would like to get us to go into an examples about what we can work together. So I would like to invite Dr. Lily Ilvilajit to introduce us about ASEAN Regional Research Infrastructure, which could be part of the European ASEAN dialogue and collaboration in the future.
Thank you. So good afternoon, and it is my pleasure to be invited by the Thailand's Ministry of Higher Education, Science, Research and Innovation to be here today. So I would like to take this opportunity to present you one of the already endorsed ASEAN COSTI Priority 2023 entitled Building an ASEAN Regional Research Infrastructure Strategy. So as I mentioned, the concept was proposed by NASDA and received the endorsement as an ASEAN COSTI Priority 2023 during the 19th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Science, Technology and Innovation this month. So here's an outline of my talk for today, and I'll go quickly right to the content. So the proposal goes like this, because we want to address the global challenges such as pandemic, environmental degradation, and so on. So it is very important for STI, or Science, Technology and Innovation, to provide solutions for these challenges. As research infrastructure, or in short RI, are essential for STI development. It is therefore important that RI must be accessible and act as a hub for capacity building and talent mobility, knowledge sharing, and importantly, research cooperation. So it's known that there is a movement in several regions in the world to develop research infrastructure strategy to ensure that the regional RI could benefit research community in the regions. Therefore, the purpose of this project is to support ASEAN in building our ASEAN Regional Infrastructure Strategy through ASEAN Committee on Science, Technology and Innovation, or COSTI, and the ASEAN collaboration with our dialogue partners for mutual benefits. So, what is the research infrastructure, or RI? In general, RI are the facilities that provide research resources and services for research communities. Examples of RI are either major scientific equipment or sets of instruments such as synchrotrons or satellites, or collection of scientific data like microbial culture collection, DNA sequences of living organisms, or computing system or communication networks. So RI could be on one side, or distributed, or even virtual. Its operation could be varied then. So however, to ensure that the use of RI is fair, maximized, and beneficial for regional research community, it is also important to have transparent rules or guidelines for the management and access of regional RI. Also, as RI will essentially be important for scientific development, as well as knowledge sharing and capacity building, and it will also serve as a key element for strengthening regional collaboration. It is therefore important for members of ASEAN to all contribute into the design of the infrastructure sharing mechanism in ASEAN. So we therefore have proposed this project aiming to strengthen regional research infrastructure in ASEAN and the collaboration with ASEAN dialogue partners. So with this initiative, we could envision that it will give the following benefits to ASEAN member states. So it will certainly offer opportunities for interdisciplinary research within ASEAN and with the dialogue partners. And importantly, it will support collaboration of the ASEAN scientific community, promote the knowledge transfer and capacity building, and also maximize the use of equipment while supporting accessibility of all ASEAN scientists. And therefore, that's like ASEAN motto, like leaving no one behind. It will also allow ASEAN to be more responsive to global challenges by collaborative with other regions for infrastructure strategy and knowledge sharing. And it will certainly promote the ASEAN researcher mobility intra-ASEAN and with our dialogue partners. The activity, which I will elaborate more later, could include the policy dialogue with our partners, identify research infrastructure in ASEAN, and the needs for utilization, and importantly, discussing framework and also potential funding source of operation. So, of course, the funding could be from within ASEAN, like ASTIF or ASEAN Science, Technology and Innovation Fund, or it could be from ASEAN dialogue partners, for example, EU under the program called eReady or Enhanced Regional EU ASEAN Dialogue Instrument that Mr. Aldo has just presented earlier. And certainly it could be in-kind support from organizations involved, such as mobility support and technological assistance support. So the project will be divided in 3 phases with sets of activities as follows. So phase 1, to strengthen ASEAN EU policy dialogue on regional research infrastructure. So this phase, it could be achieved through the bi-regional workshop involving relevant bodies in Europe. For example, ESFRI or European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructure and ASEAN COSTI, together with series of bi-regional workshops to follow up. Phase 2, to complete an ASEAN research infrastructure landscape study. This could be done through discussion among stakeholders in ASEAN, especially participating organizations with either own infrastructures or need to use ones. Discussion could focus on the assessment of infrastructure status in ASEAN, capacity building and technology transfer through the access of research infrastructure, the relevant requirements, a case study through workshop with our dialogue partners, and of course site visits to some infrastructure. And then phase 3, we plan to draft an ASEAN research infrastructure strategy as the last phase. We expect to deliver a strategy for the regional research infrastructure and disseminate this strategy back to ASEAN COSTI and ASEAN researchers and policy makers in ASEAN. So here are the list of our potential collaborators. So we welcome research centers, networks, and experts group in our sectorial and also cross-sectorial body who are interested in accessing and sharing knowledge, technology, database, and equipment among ASEAN members as well as with our dialogue partners. So the list that we shown here, they are actually have some of them probably have existing mechanism, and we actually welcome that as our contributor to share what they already have and up running, and maybe we could together set up some kind of guidelines, and we could interact with EU on this for sharing this process as well as adopting some of the more like positive one that might be suitable for ASEAN. So yes, so this is a concept proposal that Thailand has already proposed to COSTI and has been endorsed, as I mentioned, by COSTI and also AMMSTI. So we will work with several partners in ASEAN together with eReady to immediately begin our journey this year. So we will hope to have suggestions to this proposal, and or any question will be welcome as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lily.